When you first come into Carlson, there's a need to actually go through a little bit of configuring as far as the settings goes. And then this gets added onto as you go through the process of changing settings and so on. You can do save as to different drawings and save different settings, and then subsequently load those up in other new drawings. So let's go to Carlson Configure here under the Setup tab of your ribbon. And then there's several of these. We're only going to go through a few of them, but I just want to show you a couple of them here. One of them is just general settings. If you click on this, there's nothing really to change in my opinion. That seems like the defaults work pretty well. If you want to do some things, this is a place to actually change a lot of these different things. But I think for most of what you can actually go with use startup, unclick the use startup wizard. I don't like using that wizard. I like to just come in and then open the file that I want to open. So that may be one that you want to change. The rest of these are actually pretty good. And I like using annotative scales as well. So I click on that. And then I set the annotative scale to the drawing scale so that a lot of stuff works out pretty well. So I prefer to have those on. Other than that, though, really, you don't need to change very much here. So I'm going to click OK, and that's under General Settings. Now, the next one down is Project Data Folders. Now, this is going to take some areas where we need to change it. Under the Project folder, I want to go here, click on Project Subfolders just for a minute, and this is what defaults out. And I actually prefer these. I like what they've done with them, so I just leave this as a default. I don't change it, but you can change the order. You can change the items in here. Doing consulting with different companies, I know that they like having these labeled differently, and then there's other ones that aren't here that they want to add, and some they want to take away. You're totally welcome to do that. I just wanted to show you that capability. Under Startup Project Data folder, here you want to set this. So this is the Startup section where you want this to go. So I would, again, when you're first setting up Carlson, and so now what I'm doing is I'm assigning that particular folder to this. So the startup, when we start up into Carlson, it's going to go to this particular directory, and under that you're going to see what you need to. This works really well for project folders in the future as well. You can just set this, and now every time you go to that drawing, it opens up that particular folder and has this all set up for you. I really like doing it that way. Click OK there. Set current folder. I do the same thing with it. Set it at the same place, the project folder level that I've labeled for my project that I'm working on at the time. And then down below here, use data folder for settings. I don't like doing that under the settings folder. I like to have my own separate folder. So I do this, and I set this so that under my project folder, I have the settings. Professionally, I prefer to have my Carlson settings all under a company folder, so that, and perhaps even under a certain area, for example, the survey, you have a survey subdirectory and a civil engineering subdirectory or civil subdirectory. You can put those different settings in there. So if you're doing civil work, you have different settings than you do for survey work. That's how I would do it professionally. Again, those are best practices there. So those both need to be done, and set the current settings folder the same as the startup settings folder. Those are very important ones. Once you do this, as you start to go through and pull up files and start using for configuring files and so on like that, it always comes up to the same subdirectories. Works really well. I really like doing it that way. Now another one is drawing setup. This is when you go into a drawing, what does it default to? And I prefer to do 40, and it changes this automatically for everything. Vertical scale of 4. And then what it does is, and I like the 08, we just need in surveying, we find that we typically need a text type that's the smallest one you want to go with, which is 0.08. To go higher than that, of course, you can do that. Some people like using 0.1, which also works. Most of the survey work that I do, that I like doing, I like to have that capability of that smallest text. You do not ever want to go under 0.08 because it's very difficult to read and reproduce below 0.08. So you want to stick with that, or like I say, even 0.1. Some surveyors may even prefer 0.125, which is 1/8 of an inch. But I never go below 0.08. So this doesn't really change. Of course, bearing is what we like to do. Change the scale here. We're using English in this. You can do other stuff if you want to, of course. I like to keep this all like this. You can change the coordinate system. If you had this under a particular coordinate system, you could go with whatever you wanted to, UTM or state plane. whatever one you want to use. But that's nice to have a drawing set up so that it's already got that projection built into it, which I think works really well. And then all that stuff is kind of defaulted there. It all works great. So now I'm just going to click OK here. And now startup settings. These are things that you start up with. You can have a template that you put in here. You can have a profile that you typically like to use. I use this one here. You can do whatever you want to there, or you don't have to. You can just use the default there. When you first come into this, you may want to skip the splash screen. The splash screen is when you first come into Carlson. It's got various items on there. I don't like using that, but some people do. So I just leave it on for the default as a default, but it's up to you however you want to deal with it. And then click OK. And then settings updated successfully. So that works well for all those. Now, I don't go through these other ones. There is surface settings. We'll get to that later on when we get into surfaces, but that will change that settings there. And then survey settings are specific ones that you may want to change here that meet how you like to do things. So the nice thing about this is it's all in one place. Mining here, mine notes, takeoff, localization settings. So every other kinds of settings that you like to use, you can all put those in these general settings here. Now at this point, what I do is do a save as, and I always make sure that it's clicked. I use initials with everything because then that shows. Now in the case of a company, you could do that. You put the company initials up there if you wanted to, or whatever it might be. The idea here is that you have specific settings that you've modified from the Carlson settings that are already there. You don't want to be using their settings, because then when you go get an upgrade or something to the software, it comes in and overwrites all of your settings. So you want to make your own settings, and then you always have those to reference, and then you can save those out and come back to use your own settings based on the name of the company or your name or however you want to deal with that. But make sure they are not standard Carlson settings, like I said, because they'll get overwritten. So save out there, and I've already done this, so I'm just going to say yes, I want to replace it. It saves the 17,684 settings, so there's quite a few settings that it does, and then we'll go ahead and exit out of here. At this point, for current and future, yes, I want it to be current and future drawings. So if I go over here and click on new drawings over here, click on a new drawing, it's going to pop up and make automatically create a new drawing with all those new settings that I just did.